So Tiffany, Dr. Jana, who's written 4 books, one is called Overcoming Bias and is the head of TMI Consulting. I guess in a way, you're going to teach us how to keep our jobs. Because in a world right now, we have to do everything as an employee, as in a company, to dismantle systemic racism. So I am so grateful that you're here. I know you're so busy, and right now you must be busier than ever. So thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's exciting.
So Tiffany, let's start. I mean, many of us on this are probably in these, workshops right now that these corporate leaders, who mostly aren't Black or brown people, by the way, right? Who are making their employees learn about how to end racism in the corporate world and in the world, right? And so and many of us, like me, I'm my own person. I'm not on all these calls, so I don't really know what's happening. So you get a call, right, from a chief diversity officer, and they're like, Dr. Jan, you have a great reputation. You wrote all these books. You're the experts. What do they ask you?
So what people want right now is to either develop or level up a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. So what we do is TMI Consulting, we are grounded in data and metrics, and that's something that's unusual for my industry. Most people are throwing training at things. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to give people a mixed method assessment. So qualitative and quantitative data. And our latest platform is Loom, the Culture Map. And it is a software as a service that allows us to measure, map, and improve organizational culture using technology. So,
they're not just asking you to come in and like speak to their employees about.
No, so I do, I spent 2019, I was gone 90% of the time. I was both pitching VCs and doing speaking engagements. So I speak all the time. I'm still doing that. So I have kind of a motivational spirit, right? I'm able to communicate the difficult content around, racism and all of the isms in a way that people
Right,
can.
you defined yourself by a brand, emotional. I saw it.
I'm an awareness artist and a pleasure activist. And an awareness artist, it means that I'm using a myriad of any medium, including business, art, whatever, literature, to create an embrace of humanity that is wide enough to leave no one out. And pleasure activism is about liberation through joy. So my brand is joy. I believe that I look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, even in a corporate context, as an aspirational asset that allows us to force accelerate the good work that we were already here to do. But we can do it with a positive outlook. It doesn't have to be a deficit-based model, blame and shame-based model. I don't do any of that. We calibrate what you've got, we calibrate what you need, we calibrate a clear set of goals, and we get you there.
Huh. And how do you make it so positive right now? Because most of my white peers are like, oh my God, I feel so guilty. I feel so shit. I have this white fragility.
Of course. So it's about, I believe that it's about moving beyond the compliance, moving beyond the optics, and recognizing. So for me, my grand vision is the Afrofuturist workplace, and Afrofuturism is it's a genre. Sun Ra, it's music, it's art, it's Black Panther, right? So
right. That was all Afrofuturism. Yeah.
Afrofuturism. So what we're doing is
It's so cool.
people of the African diaspora envisioning a different kind of future, one that is devoid of the delusion of white supremacy, identity, hierarchy, all of the different things that create inequity in all of our systems. But I have a doctorate of management and organizational leadership. So my laboratory is the workplace. So what I believe with Afrofuturist workplace vision is that every morning I wake up, every single day I wake up and I get to do something that I love. I get to use the best of my time, my talent, my ability, my spirit in service of something greater. And everyone should be able to use their personal brand. Thank you for that. That's so cool, right? To leverage their personal brand and everything they know in service of making some kind of a difference that matters to them. And right now, our workplaces are very, very transactional. We commodify human beings. And the way that we make inspiration around, you know, a very sore subject, something that we have been utterly inept at communicating about, is by tapping into the nature of the human spirit. What happens if we reconceive of work as a collective co-creation, not only in service of the mission and vision of the organization, but in service of the actualization of the human beings that are working and co-creating together? What if part of the work is that I'm going to become the best version of myself over time? What I've learned in the many decades I've been doing this work is that the workplace is the biggest learning laboratory that we have outside of structured education, and we're not leveraging it well. What we do is we hire and promote for technical competency, but we're not paying attention to how well someone creates a sense of belonging around them, to how well people motivate and inspire the people around them, to whether or not they have a sense of love and camaraderie and compassion and empathy in their hearts. These things matter. I hate soft skills as a term. I call them interpersonal competencies, because the absence of those soft skills or interpersonal competencies will wreck your culture. And I believe that CEOs should be every bit as intentional about intentionally crafting their culture as much as they intentionally craft any other aspect of the business. We shouldn't be victims of the people we threw together and hope it all works out and we don't end up on the front page. No, we can help people build the skills and tools required to have great interpersonal competency. And they're exactly that. It's tools and skills. It's not rocket science.
Well, okay, so that seems like any human being who works in an organization should abide by those edicts and the tactics or suggestions you illuminate. How is that related in more specific ways to the dismantleization of systemic racism in corporate world? Like, how are you dovetailing those two?
Yeah. So you talked about overcoming bias, my first book. My second book was Erasing Institutional Bias, how to create systemic inclusion, systemic change for organizational inclusion, right? So what we see, that's where the metrics really come in, because it is through the lens of data that we're able to see the inequitable experience that people are having within organizations. And that's a bifurcated challenge. There is the systemic and structural sort of bias and exclusion that's built within a system. And then there's the systemic bias all around us. And that would be my third book, the B Corp Handbook, How to Use Business as a Force for Good. So that talks about creating equity at a global scale through the impacts of your business. But if we look inside the business first, what we find is that, you know, we have a lot of policies, procedures, systems, and practices that are in place because that's the way we've always done it. Right? There are a lot of things that are the unwritten rules that just exist. We're doing a lot of things without meaning to cause harm. We're tapping our own networks. We're going to our alma maters for new employees. You know, we're hiring and promoting people because we like hanging out with them and we want to have a beer with them. That does not promote like cognitive diversity or any other kind of diversity. So the first thing we want to do is actually do a structural audit, a structural inclusion audit, and look at policies, procedures, written and unwritten rules. What are the things around the embedded aspects of the organization that might be unintentionally leaving people behind? We don't create rules and regulations. Like if you have a handbook with exclusive language, I'm actually non-binary. They, them are my preferred pronouns. I'm not offended by she, because if you try to take my black girl magic away, I'll hit you. So, but if you have a handbook that is full of highly gendered language, and your dress code, you know, is a highly gendered dress code, and you are pushing people to the margins without ever meaning to. So it is about applying the DEI lens to everything that you do. The analogy that I like to use is information systems.
DEI lens, could you just
DEI lens, diversity, equity, inclusion, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at information systems and information technology, you know, 40 years ago, 35 years ago, if you had a guy, and it was definitely a guy in the basement who you called up to fix a Texas Instruments calculator when it broke, that was a big deal. Fast forward 25, 20 years ago, we recognized that if we implement and integrate information systems and information technology across the entire organization, that it force accelerates and fundamentally shifts the way we're able to do business. That is the inflection point that we're at now with diversity, equity, and inclusion. It used to be a silo, a department, a person, and what our methodology and many of the practitioners who've been around for a while are doing is integrating it throughout. There's not a single key performance indicator that you as a CEO care about that I can't link back to diversity, equity, and inclusion done well.
Wow. Okay, it's interesting. You and Matt have a lot of connective tissues. Number one, you both have like used digital technology to evaluate, in Matt's case, the individual based on the context of the company that's searching. And you have this technology too that really rates a company's level of
Calibrate their culture. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Well,
So you're
since you mentioned me, can I say a thing?
yes.
Sorry, I'm not taking time away. I'm amplifying, I think. But one of the things that I am super passionate about, and is part of our creds as well, is we use a McKinsey study that organizations that have diversity at the top are 33% more successful from a revenue perspective. So I think that we get caught in this trap of you need to have people of color or different sexual orientations or whatever because you're supposed to, versus, no, it's really good for business. It's so important, and I think we all just need to reinforce that all the time. Diversity leads to better outcomes, always.
And also, let me just chime in here too. Also, if you're creating a consumer-facing product or even a product for enterprises, it's like, you're not just selling to white men. It's kind of like what was wrong with the advertising business in terms of sexism. Why are like men making commercials for, women who are driving cars? It's not good for business.
This is the shift that's happened too. Is that what you brought up is the business case for diversity versus the social justice case for diversity. And the business case has been the focus for the past few years. The public lynching of George Floyd and the spotlight that's been put on the murder of Black men is that the social justice case actually matters because it is because of enterprise and economy that was actually built on the backs in large parts of the world, including our country, built on the black backs of enslaved Africans, that we actually owe a debt of gratitude to these communities that we marginalize. And so the social justice case isn't entirely unwarranted, but it's not enough. And that's what I love is I'm a CEO and I want to know what's happening with the resources that I deploy. So the idea of tying everything you do with your diversity back to data in service of quantified change and accountability, I think is extraordinary.
How will you define success?
How with an organization or in my career?
I think you're already successful. I'll define that for you and everybody else. Thanks. No, but in terms of how like companies becoming less racist, more inclusive, more equitable. So what company would get an A+?
So it's okay. So that's always a hard one because lots of people do different things well. There's no gold star winner for everything. But Sodexo is a company that has been deeply engaged in diversity work for a very long time. So they're way out front. That's an example of one, but I would never say that one company is just 100% perfect because it's
Well, when you say diversity work, what does that mean and what was the effect of it?
So they have had an intentional diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy program, people with diversity in their titles for decades, frankly, right? So there are people who just wrote a Black Lives Matter statement a couple weeks ago. They just made their first chief diversity C-suite hire.
Yeah.
Sodexo's been there for decades. So that's the difference. But success is, like when we deploy our first assessment, we get our baseline of where the organization is culturally. Success is closing the equity gaps, because when we disaggregate the experiential data and the psychometric measures, what we find is that millennial females are having a very different experience from baby boomer females. Black people are having a very different experience from Hispanic people. And we want to close those equity experiential gaps so that people are having more of a similar experience and more of a sense of belonging. And then the success is based on what the organization is looking for. So we often are able to see an increase in the bottom line, an expansion in their customer base. There's many numbers of things, increased representation, both in the employee base and at the leadership and at the board level. So we calibrate that destination, and success is getting to that destination and me getting to wave bye-bye because we've embedded sustainable practices within their organization.
All right, last question, because we have to wrap up. And if both of you are interested, if have some time and people want to ask questions, we always have Zeitgeist after hours, since I'm now the cultural DJ, so to speak. So is there hope? And like I keep saying that, and a lot of other people are saying it in different ways, is that COVID has been a magnifier of all the shit that impacted society before. In fact, I do my cultural almanac every year, and I wrote it in November, and the first chapter was The World on Fire. And this was in November, right? And that the only way to reboot our world being on fire is to reboot the sense of humanity. So what I'm trying to say is that our world sucked before, and this is a magnifier or an X-ray on all the problems, especially here, whether it's systemic racism, inequality, healthcare, climate change, whatever, politics, and systemic racism. And so hopefully this will be an accelerator to the world that we want to have, right? So do you have hope that what happened with Floyd and the conversations happening in corporate America is going to accelerate this horrible problem that is plaguing our society?
I always, before George Floyd's murder, I considered my work cathedral building work. I never expected to see any kind of seismic shift. I was going to build on the foundation that standing on the shoulders of those who came before me. And now I have more hope than ever, because we are now experiencing the largest civil rights movement in the history of the world, much less the nation, the world. The difference now, I believe that there is a difference between intellectually understanding and academically understanding racism and actually feeling it, because your heart cracked open when you saw something so atrocious you didn't even know how to process it. We were already traumatized from being locked down from COVID, and then we were captive to our screens, and we were forced to look at something that many of us had been able to look away from because of all of our cultural distractions. And what we have that we've never had before, because Black people have been asking for their freedom and lives from time immemorial, but what we have now that we didn't have before is we have a critical mass of allies from all cultures and all races standing with us, marching beside us, and saying that enough is enough. And that is extraordinary. We have access to the people who have their hands on the levers of power and are willing to shift, change in order to make room for more of us.
Wow. Okay. Well, Dr. Jana, you're fascinating, and I see so many connective tissues between you and Matt. Maybe you should talk, because you're both very
Yes, please.
Yeah. And it's yeah. You guys just have coffee. Before we go to questions, I just wanted to remind everybody that tomorrow or next week is our last. Did I share or no? Did I share the screen? No, I didn't share the screen. Sorry. Next week is our last culture class, like I said before, and I had a Zeitgeist on all of them. Next week, I am going to have a Zeitgeist, but I'm not going to reveal who it is, because it's going to be very special, and hopefully it'll inspire curiosity. But also, since so many of you love the beginning where I'm doing the Zeitguiding, that's what I do for my clients, my customers, and I have a premium class where anybody from any company could come on, and I do a Zeitguide culture class on my 4 buckets: global, tech, consumer, and work. I am going to do a premium sample next week. So the whole thing is just going to be me zygoting. I hope it's awesome, but there's going to be a couple special guests that I don't want to reveal yet. And if you have time tomorrow, one of my dreams, I check on my bucket list, is that I am going to be on the virtual stage of the 92nd Street Y. And I'm so excited. And for many of you, you've been on Culture Class and seen the interview that I did with Charles Renfro, the architect of Diller Scofidio Renfro, who designed the High Line, the Shed, and buildings and public spaces all over the world. We're going to do it tomorrow at 7 p.m. The tickets, all proceeds go to the 92nd Y, and I hope we support them because we know that how many, how these live event businesses are being impacted so harshly by COVID and everything else. So I hope I see many of you tomorrow. So you could, I'll put this in the chat if you want to RSVP, and tomorrow night. And next week we're going to finish. So if you both have time, I'm sure people might have questions. Anybody? I'm sorry, if you could just do it now. I can't scroll because it's just. Let me ask a question then to Matt, to both of you. And by the way, Dr. Jana and Matt, please put your info in social, all that kind of stuff in the chat for everybody. What would be one piece of advice you tell everybody on this call about trying to get their next job?
Well, they should probably reach out to me.
You're such a salesperson. I love it.
No, but the most important thing in getting your next job is cutting out all the noise that's around you. That I can't emphasize enough. The mistake that almost everyone makes is they attempt to be too open to opportunity. And in a COVID world, that's exaggerated because everybody feels like they just need to get a job. And the problem is nobody's hiring for a job. People are hiring for a very specific thing that they need to have done in order to move the organization forward. Don't be open. Be really restrictive. Tell people no. Tell them exactly what you're interested in and then be able to support why you are uniquely qualified. So the counterintuitiveness of this is everybody thinks cast a wide net because you're bound to catch something. And the answer is make sure you have the right bait on that one hook, not a net.
Great answer. That's very inspirational. So don't rush into it. Really, this is your time to really soul search about who you are and what you want. Tiffany has a question from somebody. How do you take a company from checking the DEI box to a culture of inclusion? Not, maybe conclusion if they're not inclusive. How's that?
Finish. No mas. Yes. So first of all, I'm at a point in my career, like the pleasure activist in me will say, if you're looking for a job, you got to lean into what you love and what brings you joy, because then it never, ever feels like work. I haven't worked since, I don't know, somewhere in my 20s, right? So the people who want to check the box.
I know there's a reason for that, by the way, that we could talk about it somewhere.
We will. I look forward to it. So I screen people for that ahead of time. At this point in my career, I don't work with anyone who's checking the box. In order to engage with my methodology, people have to commit to a minimum of 12, 18, or 24 months, depending on the size and age of their organization. And the very first thing I'm doing is engaging with executive leadership, senior leadership, to find out where everyone is, because there are three things that will make any diversity effort fail. And the first one, it's like any change management, insufficient buy-in from the top. All it takes is one detractor to completely wreck, and I won't allow my clients to fail. So I'm going to work very closely with executive leadership to make sure that whatever their objections, their concerns, their fears, whatever they are, there's nothing I haven't seen, right? There's only so many variations on a theme. So we address those up front and make sure that we turn folks into champions. And if the board of directors wants to opt out, or the leadership says, this is only for employees, we don't want this, they don't get to work with me. They can work with somebody who's going to just sell them training and they'll be happy, but we don't check boxes over here.
Okay. What would you advise Matt for starting his new infrastructure over there to make sure that he can help place people of color, different genders, different identities, and as well as the companies that he's working with to place these people?
Well, you best believe that I was doing what BIPOC people do, and that's Black, Indigenous, people of color, BIPOC.
Yeah.
And as soon as you started scrolling the website, I was looking for the faces of color, because when we're looking to you for support, if we don't see a reflection of ourselves, then we don't know whether that's by design or by default, and we don't frankly have time to figure that out. So the fact that you already have diverse representation means that there's at least some cultural fluency that can handle me, right? That's not going to think that when I do this and start gesticulating with my hands that I'm angry. No, it's the cultural communication of a Black person, a Black woman. I'm passionate, I'm engaged. So that's a great start. The next thing is just going to be, I don't know what the recruiting process looks like. How do you go about finding these people? But it is about being really intentional about casting a much wider net, about going beyond the bounds of the known networks and intentionally curating people. For every professional association that you can identify, there are multiple racial equivalents. So the National Association of Certified Public Accountants, there's a National Association of Black Certified Public Accountants, Asian Certified Public Accountants. So identifying the places where folks might be and letting them know that you're available and looking for all kinds of people is the best way to do it.
And historic Black colleges as well.
Yeah.
To find people. And Matt, what kind of advice would you ask from Tiffany as you are building your marketplace of amazing people who should get amazingly unique jobs?
Well, so I will reach out to you, Tiffany, under a less public forum. But
she's very expensive, by the way. Very expensive.
There's probably a little quid pro quo or something, because I think we need to shorten up your brand a little bit. I think there's a few too many words in there. But anyway, so what I would love your thoughts on is, you're right, we do have some really great African American representation within the firm, and one of my partners is working with the marketplace on finding the right organizations with whom to create some kind of a JV in order to ensure that we're getting the right people into the marketplace. We're doing that for women, for veterans, and for people of color. So I'd love your thoughts on if there are particular organizations that we should consider partnering with. Love to know which you think would be best. Be really, really helpful. But I'll reach to you separately.
Awesome.
Okay. One last question for both of you. When are we, because you're talking to so many people, when do you think we're all going to be going back to the physical office? I know that's like random, but you're both in like the C-suite space.
So, I'll answer first if it give you a sec to think. What I would say is, I love you. You know I love you, and I'm going to answer this in a way that's going to sound like I don't, because I could say that's the wrong question. Because I think that part of the theme of everything that we talk about is getting back to the way things were. That our objective is to get back to the office because that's where we used to go. Rather, I think the question should be, do we need to go back to an office? When are the times when we should be together? When are we better off not being together? How do we do virtual? So I personally don't think I'll ever go back to an office. I'll go there when I'm at a great meeting with Tiffany or somebody else or you. But I'm not going to the office every day. I don't see the need. And I absolutely applaud companies that are using Corona to start making the decisions again that should have been made ages ago, because what we've learned is that people are more productive when you give them your confidence, when you show them you trust them. And so I don't have an interest in getting back to the way things were.
No.
Well, this is a good, sorry, Tiffany, I'm just going to add something onto that because I just got a question from Taj Greenlee, who, by the way, is from the 92nd Y. So glad. I hope I'm passing the test and you're excited for tomorrow. He says, what's a fun thing we could do to make our days working from home easier? So there's the flip side. Tiffany, why don't you take that one?
You're asking the pleasure activist?
Yeah.
So it's weird because for me, it's not any different than it would have been when I wasn't working from home. And it's about like it's prioritizing pleasure, prioritizing fun. And what fun looks like for you is going to be different for other people. So what I recommend you do is make a list of activities that you find fun, whether it's, you know, playing cards.
Drinking. Drinking.
Drinking. That can be sketchy in the middle of your work day, but
right.
But yeah, so make a list of things that bring you joy, of activities that bring you fun, that make you feel that joy, and then prioritize creating a slice of time to knock a couple of the fun things off of your list like you would the other priorities. The biggest thing for me in the COVID times is differentiating, because I used to work from home, and I was a work at home and a stay at home mom when my children were very small, and differentiating my work day from the end of my day. And my big one is differentiating my weekends from my work days. If you create really strict boundaries, the work from home thing won't make you crazy. I stop my work at a certain time and I maintain that discipline so that that rest of that time is mine, and I can be present to my family, present to myself, do my meditation, walks, whatever it is. So I think differentiation and then prioritizing your personal list of joy bringing activities.
I love you. Just gave me an opportunity to kind of show off another curatorial thing. Look at this. The pandemic workday is 48 minutes longer and has more meetings. A study of 3.1 million workers around the world found an uptick in email.
Email.
Yeah. Crazy. 21,000 companies they researched. So, but come on, Zoom fatigue.
It's real. So with Zoom fatigue, I do not show up on a screen unless it is mandatory. If somebody is paying me 5 figures to show my face, I will show my face. Otherwise, my screen is off and I take a call, because I clock an average of a mile a call just from pacing. I can't afford to lose those steps these days. So no screen. And the whole work from home phenomenon is a diversity issue, right? The idea of turning on my screen and sharing even a tiny slice of my home, that is deeply private. I might not invite you to my house, whoever you are. And if I wouldn't invite you to my house, what makes you think that I want to turn on my screen? Not everyone has the privilege of a home where they can make an office space. And if you've got 5 dogs, 2 cats, and 3 screaming children, it's a disadvantage. So I think that we need to be a lot more thoughtful about our expectations of when and how people show up, and not expect FaceTime all the time.
I agree. Can you, as employees, or us as employees, or I'm not an employee, but you know, could they say to their bosses like, "Hey, I'm so zoomed out. Could I just call it?" Yeah.
Yeah, it's an inclusion issue. Whether it is your mental health, your energy reserves, if you link it to your productivity. Hey, boss, I notice that when I don't have to be on the screen as much, I'm able to maintain a cadence of energy that allows me to be more productive. Ain't nobody gonna argue with that.
Yeah. And what about you, Matt? It seems like you need to kind of step up your work from home equipment.
Well, but I totally get it from a DEI perspective. I started this conversation in the laundry room, and I worked out of the laundry room for a while. And what I actually love is actually sort of opposite to me of, I like that people are in my home. There's no pretense. I don't like it when people put screens up and pretend that they're somewhere else and somewhere else, being someone else in a different environment. I love that, like, this is me. This is real. This is not me putting a suit on. This is not me coming to an office and going into a boardroom and talking to you as a business person. This is us talking as people, and I think that that's another thing that I don't want us to go back to. I love the notion that we are talking to each other as human beings. I love, and granted, I'm a very senior, old person who doesn't have a lot to prove to young people who, when I'm in a laundry room, I can joke about it. Other people that are in the laundry room because they have no other place to go, that's a very different situation. I'm not making light of that. But I think it's really important for all of us. We had a new wonderful person join our firm in Chicago a couple of months ago, and he came to the call with me in a tie and a white shirt, and I could see the laundry machine right behind him. Like, dude, you do not have to do that. Like, putting on a shirt and tie doesn't make it like we're suddenly in a business environment. You're in your kitchen. There's your washing machine. I'm good. I'm in my laundry room. There's mine. So I love that. I think that that's really important. And then to the other point, which I think Tiffany is 100% right, of, find time for pleasure. Don't feel as though you're chained to your desk and that it's the same old, same old. And with that too, we're all fatigued with the numbers of conversations that we have to have during the day. But there's a thing that we know is each of us is home. And so people that you haven't spoken to in a while, people that you'd love to reach out to professionally, personally, do that because you know where they are. So reach out, create a broader community through this, not just through the social platforms, but actually by talking to people.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's end with that moment of inspiration. Let's end with that moment of inspiration. Thank you both. You are actually the last my final culture class of the summer, where I have amazing experts like you both. So thank you for kicking off the culture class or ending the culture class season. And again, next week, for everybody still on, I'm going to do my Zeit guiding, and we'll take a break, and then I'll tell you what's going to happen in the fall. I don't know yet. No one knows anything. So
right.
I know that I love doing this.
Part of this.
And I know I love doing this. And
I look forward to our continued conversation.
Thank
you, Brad.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Tiffany, thank you.
That was so fun. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we should figure stuff out, because you're the person who's really into education, and that's what I do. I'm trying to provide cultural education for people in a big picture, holistic point of view. So yeah, you two couldn't be more different. It seemed like it was about to turn into a debate.
Oh, it was adorable. I love it, though. I love it.
Yeah, no, which I love too. I feel like next time we should have a debate. Anyway, I'm gonna have we're gonna have like a Zeitgeist party at some point.
Oh, cool.
So you could all meet each other. There's about 40 of you. So.
Oh wow, that's so cool. I will definitely try to make that. I love it.
Yeah. All
Look,
right.
what is the weirdest event that you've attended on Zoom?
I haven't attended it.
You haven't?
Oh, no.
I went to a Zoom wedding last weekend.
Oof.
It was amazing. It was
really?
Yes, and this is what keeps blowing my mind. Is I've now done 3 weird Zoom events, and I have a 4th one tonight. And every time I'm just like, oh my God, this is gonna suck. I can't believe I love this person enough to do it. And then it ends up being energizing and life-giving and beautiful. So the wedding was done in the Quaker style. And so it was a participatory wedding, and it was absolutely lovely. I did a blessing way, so like an indigenous baby shower kind of ceremony. And usually when you have them, you're stuck with the people who live close to you. So this person's friends and family from all over the world was able to be there, and that's also a participatory thing. So it's like these things that you would imagine are, the things that are rooted in togetherness, right? In this cultural grouping, actually have found a space in this digisphere that is very life-giving, right? And affirming in the space in a time when
I need to hang out with you more. You're so positive. And clearly I have that part of the spectrum, but
I love it.
I'm so blessed that Helene introduces. I don't think she was on.
No, she wasn't. I texted her ahead of time. She did tell me to send you one.
I love her. Well, can we please follow up? I'm gonna.
Yes, I would love to.
Next Wednesday is my last day. I'm glad you got to see a little bit of the Zeit guiding. I usually do that for an hour.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was very cool.
All right, take care. Bye, everybody.
Bye.